Welcome to the Sample Chapter Podcast, the show where authors read a sample chapter from one of their books. Here's your host, Jason A. Meiske.
Hello, my friends. Jason A. Meiske here, your host of the Sample Chapter Podcast. That's right, this is the show where authors read a sample chapter from one of their books. This is episode 42, and it is early. The things I do for this show. Oh my goodness, yeah, it's a weekend. I got lots of things going on, and I'm up at 5 a.m. I'm going to go ahead and get all of this stuff done. I'm getting the show prepared for Tuesday coming up. But that's all right, it's worth it. And I've learned my lessons as I've gone through that it's best to have these episodes prepared in advance, right? Better to be prepared than to try and do things last minute and risk, something coming up. So, like I said, this is episode 42 of the Sample Chapter Podcast. You can follow us on Facebook at Sample Chapter Podcast on Facebook.com. We are also on Twitter, so you can tweet us there. I believe our handle is Chapter Sample. You can send us a message through either one of those ways if you'd like to reach out and contact us. Or you can email us at samplechapterpodcast@gmail.com. Use any of those methods to reach out if you would just like to contact me, say hello. If you are an author and you'd like to come on the show, if you know an author that you would like to have come on the show, someone that you would like me to interview, reach out to me. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to talk to that author. I'd love to talk to you if you are that author. That'd be great. So we just had our first snow of the year on Friday here in Missouri. And it was a pretty good snow. It was really gorgeous. Got to come home Friday afternoon, and it was just that really thick, fluffy snow that was coming down for a couple of hours. We had the fake fireplace going in the living room, and it was really nice. The windows were open. It was cold, that's for sure. But it's funny how your ears can be tricked into. I don't know if you've ever tried this or not, but if you ever had one of those fake fireplaces and you can hear that crackling sound, it tricks your mind into getting warm. It's odd how you do that. If you don't know what I'm talking about, try out. If you've got like a Google Home, or if you have some other device that can play it, or go to YouTube or Netflix or whatever and pull up one of those fake fireplaces and have it play for a while, and just, don't do anything else. Just have that playing. And it's funny how after a while you get that warm sensation. And it was really nice to sit there and watch the snow. And I just felt really cozy. And I pulled out my laptop and did a little bit of writing for NaNoWriMo. And it was really cool. And I actually I've actually used that a couple of times to use as a timer, because the fireplace will run for about an hour. And so I use that as a timer for as long as the fire's going, I'm going to do some writing for NaNoWriMo on my new story. And it was fantastic, and all of a sudden the fire would stop. It goes back to the queue, and I look it down. I'm like, wow, I just wrote 1,000 words. So it was a lot of fun. It's really neat, unique way to do it. Coming up on Sunday, it is Veterans Day, and I am a veteran. My wife is a veteran. We both have many family members that are veterans, and I just want to give a huge shout out to all of you out there who are veterans. There's something about, and like I said, I'm never going to get political on this show, but I do want to appreciate that there is just something different about that person who woke up one day and said, for a period of time in my life, I'm going to give this life that I have to my country. There are perks. There are lots of great things you can do in the military. But bottom line, that's something that some people don't realize is they're donating their life for a period of time to our country. And that's just something unique. And not every service member goes in and is doing, the gung-ho stuff. Sometimes you're doing something like I did. I was a glorified taxi driver. But, then again, you have people like my wife, who was a chaplain assistant, which meant she was combat ready because it was her job to bodyguard the chaplain. And if anybody knows my wife, that was a unique experience because she's 5 foot, and they kept putting her with chaplains who were around 6 foot tall. So, yeah, my wife made me very jealous several times that while I'm getting training on how to drive different vehicles, driving across Alaska and different places, my wife is getting training on, today she's firing off the grenade launcher, and then she's shooting M60s and, all kinds of weapons training and hand-to-hand combat and stuff. And I'm just like, well, I just drove a big bus, so it was fun though. And we didn't serve at the same time. We served years apart from each other, but still. But something that is going along with Veterans Day, something that is very, very close to my heart, is make sure that you do recognize the women out there serving and who have served, because I can't tell you how many times my wife and I would be somewhere, and it's interesting how many times people automatically look at me like, oh, okay, yeah, you're a veteran family. Well, how long did you serve, sir? Thank you for your service. They look at me. I just look at my wife and go, no, it's her. You need to thank her. And, and then of course my wife, she's lovely. She'll correct me and be like, no, it's both of us. But it's strange, because like when we were serving, she'd be in uniform and I'm standing there with a full beard, and people are still looking at me like, oh, well, thank you for your service. I'm like, really? My wife's in uniform. Do you see that? It's a unique situation because I think a lot of times the women veterans do get overlooked. And this Veterans Day, I know this episode is going to come out post Veterans Day, but, going down the road, I hope it's something that you keep in mind, that women serve too. They put on combat boots. They are deploying. They're doing everything that the men are doing. So make sure that we remember them as well as everybody else who has served. Remember all the vets would be the most important thing. Remember them all. Anyway, that's my podium for the day, my podium moment for the day. And now a word from our sponsor. U-Store All of Warrensburg, Missouri is the premium place for self-storage. Whether you're looking for climate control or non-climate control, that is the place you want to go. They are completely fenced in with gated access, your own private gate code, more than 40 cameras recording 24 hours a day, concrete driveways throughout the entire facility, which cuts down on dust flying in through the doors. That cuts down on mud getting on your tracks, or perhaps dropping your stuff into the gravel. Make sure you go to ustoreall.net and check them out. That is the letter U, STORALL.net. Speaking of veterans, our guest today was a 30-year spouse of a military veteran. Elizabeth Clamon is just a absolute joy to speak with. She is a lovely woman who has had a remarkable life. She just began writing a year and a half ago and has been changing lives, writing her autobiographical stories about brokenness and stress relief. She is a speaker and naturopath and Christian life coach, and so using all these methods to help people out, she reflects on her own life and the amazing things that she's been through, not just as a military spouse, but you're going to hear about a lot of the things that she's been through that have broken her, things that have broken her spirit, just life things that have gone on. And she writes about these things and reflects on how you can grow past these things. With her books like Remember the Butterfly Effect, she was in a collaboration of Voices of the 21st Century. She has some fantastic tips on how to de-stress that I think were fantastic. I do want to give heads up that her reading today for her book, her brand new book, Beauty Rising from Brokenness. It's an emotional book, and her reading does cut off a little bit short, but it's for a good reason. And it's one of those things where she's writing about rising above brokenness, but that doesn't mean it's not still impactful still today. And, my heart just went out to her. It was really hard for her to go back to that place and start reading from there. And, bless her heart, she went through and she did read quite a bit. She left, she leaves us hanging on something that you're going to, as she starts reading, you're going to be like, yeah. And she kind of gives you a little cliffhanger. So you're going to want to pick up the book. And the fantastic thing is, like I said, this episode's going to come out on Tuesday, November 13th. So if you're listening to this on today, that day, then tomorrow is when the book comes out, November 14th. And it will be on sale special that day for 99 cents. So make sure tomorrow, after you listen to this, November 14th, whenever it is that you're listening to this, November 14th is when the book comes out. It's going to be on sale for 99 cents. That's the best time to pick it up. You're going to want to read it. It's fantastic. I've been perusing it myself, and it's extremely touching stuff. And another really great thing about this is last week we had Joe Moore on here, and he talked about how his book, his proceeds go towards a charity foundation that he heads up. Same as that, Elizabeth Clamon, she donates a portion of her proceeds to military spouse programs. So, again, ironic that I've got people 2 weeks in a row with something in common. So I just think it's amazing. I think it's really, really cool. And I think you're going to really enjoy my talk with author Elizabeth Clamon. Hello, friends. Jason here with another episode of the Sample Chapter Podcast. Today, I am having such a good time speaking to a new friend, Elizabeth Clamon, speaker, naturopath, and Christian life coach. Elizabeth, thank you so much for coming to the show. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. Tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
Well, I am a mother of 3 and a military wife of 30 years. I have 2 grandchildren, and all of a sudden in my 50s, I've decided or been appointed, or however you want to put it, together. So I'm out with a book, and I've got a bunch of other books coming out, collaborations in my own books, and I also go around and speak to, I tell people pretty much anybody, if there's anybody who'll listen, I'll go speak. So that's what I'm doing with my retirement.
That's fantastic. Well, as somebody who's been both the military active duty member and the military spouse, thank you for your service, because we go through as much, not as much, but we suffer as much, I guess it would be one way to put it. So thank you for everything you've done.
Oh, absolutely. It's, they said it was going to be an adventure, and they didn't lie. It has been an adventure, but I usually tell people that I always see the picture of the Air Force guy holding up the world, or the military guy holding up the world, and all the other people around the world. And I said there should be a military spouse holding them up, juggling kids and a house and a job and everything else. Because that's how it feels, like you're supporting them and you're having to keep everything else going at the same time.
Oh gosh, yes. It definitely felt that way sometimes. So
yes. And that's one thing I do want to mention is all of my proceeds, I give a portion of my proceeds to military spouse deployed or who lost their spouse overseas. Because I know what it's like to be that spouse at home and have the car break down or the hot water heater go out, and you're there with the kids and you don't have a clue how to get it fixed, and you need help. And so that's my cause, is to give to military spouses organizations that support our military spouses when they have deployments or they lose a spouse.
Oh, that's fantastic. That is really, really nice of you.
Well, it's, when you've been there, you kind of understand.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, now we were talking a little bit before, and you were telling me about how it's always been your dream to be a writer.
No, I was not telling you that. You're fibbing.
How did you get into writing?
I was a math nerd in school. I actually took 2 of my elective credits as math. That's how much of a math nerd I was. And I was a bookkeeper in my other life. So I never had any interest in writing. And my husband's been on me, and other friends have been on me for years. You need to write a book. You need to write a book. And I kept saying, I don't like to write. I don't like to write. I don't want to write. And I just woke up about 6 months ago and felt like I was called to write this story. And this is the story of my life journey through childhood trauma and developing chronic illness that was triggered by the trauma, and then how I healed myself and recovered mentally, physically, and emotionally and spiritually. And it kind of walks the reader through not only my story, but how I healed, and gives them examples and tips on how they can heal as well.
Oh, wow. Was it some of these episodes or some of these articles then that came into Remember the Butterfly Effect?
Yes, I write a blog, a natural health blog at clamonnaturalhealth.com, and from my naturopathic training. And that's how I started out, because and this is my next book that's coming out, but I was disabled and bedridden for 12 years from a car accident. And so when I was able to start doing something, I wanted to take baby steps. So I started the blog, and I had my degree in natural health before the accident happened. So the blog was kind of my baby step to get started, and then added some consulting and some coaching, and now being an author and speaking, which is really what I was headed towards doing in the first place, was speaking. The authorship just kind of happened.
Oh my gosh.
And so I just took a couple collections of my articles from the blogs and did a couple of mini books on Create Space that are on Amazon. And I have the Remember the Butterfly Effect, how everything affects everything, how stress affects our health, and then 20 chronic illnesses and their natural therapies.
Oh my gosh. Well, now tell me a little bit about this then. This is a fascinating subject to me, about because I'm a pretty easygoing guy, but I know lots of people who stress out an awful lot, and then they also, it seems, no matter what, they end up with a lot of health issues. And it sounds like it could be the stress. Is that what you would agree with? Or?
I would absolutely agree with that, because the stress raises your cortisol levels. And when your cortisol levels go up and your insulin levels go up, then you get inflammation in your body, and that inflammation triggers a lot of illnesses. So a lot of the autoimmune illnesses and things like that are triggered by the inflammation in our bodies. So if we could get that stress under control early, then we can prevent the illnesses. Or if we catch it later and we start getting it under control, we can at least try to help control it without so many medications.
That's fantastic. Now, what's a great way to everyday stress reliever? Something you would recommend?
Something I recommend every day is to get some sunshine, if there's sunshine. I know up north it's hard to get sunshine. You got to take vitamin D. But even they have what they call on Amazon a happy light. And it's a light. It's just a little light that you put beside you. We lived in Michigan and Massachusetts and Minnesota, so I know about that, not getting enough sunshine. You can get that happy light, and that happy light, just let it sit on you and shine into your face, on your skin, for 30 minutes a day, and it will help bring up your happy hormone levels. And reset your brain. But if you could get out and get a 30-minute stroll, you don't have to power walk or anything like that. Get some sunshine, get some fresh air, oxygenate your system. That's one of the best things that you can do to relieve stress. Some other things, I have some recipes for herbal teas in there that are great stress relievers. Things like Epsom salt baths, aromatherapy like lavender and orange, and any of the citruses are all very relaxing. Just, simple, easy things that you can do to take care of yourself and to lessen your stress. And then CBD oil is a big one too. I know CBD oil is all the rage right now, but it really does help. We have those receptors in our body, and it really does help to reduce the stress and anxiety that we're under living in such a fast-paced life.
That's awesome. Wow. Well, thank you so much for that great tip. I know I will be passing this on, and I hopefully everybody out there listening will give this a try and take a moment to just kind of calm yourself and relax and take some of the stress out of your life.
Yes, absolutely. Exercise. Exercise is one of the big things in everybody's. I don't have time, but if you just do 15 or 20 minutes a day, it makes a huge, huge difference.
Fantastic. So you've just been writing in the last less than a year.
Yes, for about a year. I've been doing a lot. Well, I've been writing. I started the blog in March of 2017. And so I've been doing the blog for about a year and a half, and I have over 200 articles on there. Most of them are mine. Some of them are from contributors that have contributed to the blog as well. And then I took, I think, about 8 or 9 articles and put them into that book, Remember the Butterfly Effect. And I took 20 different articles and put into the chronic illness book about just different types of chronic illnesses and natural therapies that you can use to treat them and to also to lessen the symptoms. And then about 6 months ago, I just really felt like I needed to write the first part of my life story and share with people my journey through childhood trauma that led to chronic illness in my 30s and how I healed from that.
My goodness. And that's going to be Beautifully Broken?
That is going to be Beauty Rising from Brokenness.
Oh, okay. Okay, yeah. Beauty Rising from Brokenness. And when does that come out?
That comes out on November the 14th is our launch day. That's our big launch day. We're going to have a party, and we're going to have a Kindle sale for 99 cents on Amazon. You can get the book for 99 cents on Amazon that day, anytime within that 24 hours of November the 14th.
Fantastic. That's going to be exciting. And this episode should be dropping on November 13th. So, yeah, everybody out there listening, you got less than 24 hours, and the book is going to be available. So, wait just another minute, and then you can get it the next day for 99 cents. This is going to be fun, and it looks like it's going to be a fantastic book.
It takes you through the ups and the downs and the ins and the outs, and a lot of people who have read it sit with their mouth open, and some people tear up, my husband being one of those, and I'm like, why are you tearing up? You went through it with me. But sometimes walking back through those difficult times, it does bring back some emotion, bring up some emotions. But my reason for writing it is I just want to help other people who maybe are suffering from chronic illness, or maybe who are suffering from PTSD, from childhood traumas, or any kind of traumas, to know that there's hope and there's healing. There is a way out, and you can heal and you can get better. Because at one point I was in the bed and I couldn't even take care of my young children because I was so ill. And I had to walk through, you have to go back through to go out. And so I had to walk back through a lot of those traumas that caused it to come out to the other side.
My goodness. Wow. And I had no idea about, so much of this before we got to talking, and even up until just tonight when we began speaking, and learning so much about this. So many people are going to be learning about this right now through the podcast and other podcasts that you're doing in promotion of the book, and then of course diving into the book. This is going to be a real event, I think, and a great experience for people.
A lot of people don't realize, and I talk in the book about adverse childhood traumas, and there's a survey that you can take, and I have a companion guide that goes along with the book that they'll be able to download for free. and they'll be able, and I have the site throughout the book and in the back of the book, and they'll be able to download that, and they'll be able to take some assessments and make a plan and work a plan to get healed and get healthy. But a lot of people don't even realize that they have those adverse childhood traumas. And then also a lot of people don't realize that you can have pre-birth trauma as well. You can be traumatized before you're ever even born, just based on how your mother's feeling, her emotions, what she's going through, and the atmosphere that she's in, the household that she's in, the relationships she's in. All of that affects the baby.
Wow.
And I go into that in the book as well.
Okay. Now that's fascinating stuff. Now, backing up just a little bit here, so we were talking about, so you started your blog in March of 17, and then you started putting out some of these other smaller books just in the last few months. How many books have you written and then have coming out just over the next few months?
I did. I put those books out in July of this past year, put them together into some mini books and put them on Amazon. And then this book I started writing in about June of this year.
My goodness. And then on top of that, you've got a few more coming real soon.
I do. I have a couple of contributing books that we're doing collaboration books with. I have one coming out in October the 16th, and that one will also be 99 cents on Amazon for the day of October 18th, for the entire day, and it's called Voices of the 21st Century, and it's 30 women speakers who have come together and all contributed a chapter, and my chapter in that book is called Relentless, and it shares a little bit of this story. It gives you just a little snapshot of what beauty rising from brokenness is. And then I have another one coming out in December that is a collaboration book from a telesummit that I did. And that one's called I Rise Living Beyond the Bruises. And my chapter in it is called Flawless. And it's a little bit about the story of what happens after beauty rising from brokenness.
Okay.
So I'm getting lots of opportunities to write when I never intended to be a writer. Funny how those things happen, isn't it?
I would say so. Oh, my goodness.
They just keep coming at me, and I'm just like, well, okay, I guess this is what I'm supposed to be doing.
There you go. Yes. Roll with it. No stress.
Exactly. Exactly. And I just sit down and I just write. One of the ladies gave us a long structured thing, and I said, do I have to follow this? And I said, because I'm just kind of a writer. When I write, I just sit down and write. And she said, do what you do, and then we'll work on it.
Oh, I love it. I really love speaking with you. This has been enlightening. This has been inspiring, and I cannot wait for your book. I can't wait to grab a copy for myself. And I really think this is going to be a book that's going to help a lot of people, and I think it's going to touch a lot of people too. So
that's the whole point. That is the whole point. If what I've been through can help someone else have hope and healing and know that there's healing and that there's freedom at the end, then it's all been worth it.
All right. And tell us one more time, what's the name of the book?
The book is called Beauty Rising from Brokenness, Journey Through Childhood Trauma and Chronic Illness and into Healing.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I hand you over to Elizabeth Clamon.
I'm going to read you Part 2, The Hurt, The How, Chapter 2, The First Major Crack, Do You Have Fractures Too? The most common way people give up their power is by thinking they don't have any. That's a quote by Alice Walker. By the time I was in my 30s, I came to a point that I felt I needed to know where I came from. Up until this point in my life, despite asking repeatedly, no one would tell me who my biological father was. I asked my mother repeatedly growing up, and she always became very irrational, emotional, verbally abusive, and so much so that I finally quit asking. I did gather up the courage to ask my grandmother once after my oldest daughter was born. She told me she had sworn to my mother that she would never give me his name. I was obviously upset, so she gave me a few facts, I believe in hopes that it would pacify my need to know, and it did for a while. She told me that he was a nice young man. He had been to their homes on several occasions for meals, and they did really like him. He was a traveling worker and some kind, and therefore had an erratic schedule. She went on to tell me they had no idea my mother was pregnant until I was born. After I was born, my mother went to find him, and when she came back, she told my grandmother she found out that he was married and had a child. After that, they never spoke of it again. However, for years around the holidays, a man would call my grandmother's home and ask to speak to my mother. My mother always refused to take the call, and eventually the calls stopped. I came to terms at the time that this was probably all I would ever know, especially after my grandmother passed away just a year later. I really didn't give much thought to who my father was after this. I was so consumed with grief of losing my grandmother. Then our second daughter was born just 6 months later. My husband joined the Air Force Reserves and was in basic training, and life was just busy and there wasn't time to dwell on who he might be. The next 10 years went by in a blink of an eye, it seemed. We experienced more loss with a second trimester miscarriage of our third child. Our son was born a couple of years later and immediately went to the neonatal unit. After a third cesarean section for me, he was born with immature lungs and required special care and oxygen in the neonatal unit. My mother and stepdad and younger brother were there for his birth, but they had made plans to visit my half-sister and her family in New Orleans that weekend. After they took my son to neonatal, I needed love and support from my family. In my time of greatest need, where was my family? They left and went to New Orleans as they had planned. I can't even tell you how much that hurt me, and it revealed yet another crack in my brokenness. The deep-seated feelings of abandonment and being less than came rushing back. Thank God my in-laws came over from Texas to help, and our church family gave us the support and love that we desperately needed during this time. Over the course of the next few years, we moved away from our first home and bought a home near where I spent my teen years. 6 months after we got married, we bought and cleared a piece of land ourselves and put a modular home on it, only 5 minutes from my mom and stepdad. We lived there until the spring of 1997. We loved living in the country, but the 1-hour drive I made to drop our girls at school and go to work began wearing on me greatly. We put the home on the market and prepared to move closer to my job in the girls' school. We bought a wonderful house that was built in 1922 closer to my work in the girls' school, and we loved that old house. It was big and it had all kinds of character. My mother's stepdad and brother had moved to Texas a couple of years before due to my mother being transferred to the job. Frankly, when they moved, it was a relief not to have to be nearby. Being on my own with them hundreds of miles away was better for me. The briefness of our interactions during this time was a sweet relief. We saw them a few times a year and made the drive to their home, and one time they came back to Louisiana. However, for the most part, I was on my own. My husband was away in military school, and I was happy. After my husband graduated from military school, we worked really hard to provide for our children. Our first set of military orders came in the summer of 1998. 2 months in Florida, Cocoa Beach to be exact. We decided to pack up our camper and go with my husband to Florida. We were supposed to be there for 2 months, but as life would have it, we stayed in Florida for 2 years. The first couple of months on the base in Cocoa Beach, then a civilian job in Lake City, and then back to Cocoa Beach for a job on the base there. That's 3 moves in 2 years. You would think I wouldn't have much time to think about my brokenness or to contemplate who my father might be. But if I would ever know, however those times were, it was in my constant thought. It was my constant companion. Florida was the first time I'd ever lived away from home. I began to feel a sense of freedom I had never known. As I began to look at my life up until this point, I realized I still wanted to know. I had a deep-seated, unquenchable thirst to know who my biological father was. I needed to know, to understand who he was, who I am. Why wasn't he in my life? Why wouldn't anyone tell me the truth? I was over 30 years old after all.
And that was author Elizabeth Clamon reading from her newest book, Beauty Rising from Brokenness. I warned you, it was touching, and it going forward from where she left off, it really starts to dive deep into some more of the things that left her broken and how she rose above that. Check it out online. I will have links in the show notes where you can go pick it up for 99 cents on November 14th. Make sure that you are following her and follow us wherever it is that you listen to podcasts. And don't forget to subscribe, because if you subscribe, you will never miss an episode when we come back each week with a new author, a new book, and a new sample chapter. Thank you, everybody. Bye.